Hello, happy Sovereign Sunday.
Hello, happy Sovereign Sunday.
So we're a few minutes late, and that's because I was in the middle of a war, and so it took me a few minutes
But
to get my shit together to be able to get.
we're here, we made it.
You know what happens? Technology, right? Like technology, there's always going to be like little glitches and things like that, and so I decided to reconfigure the whole podcasting setup. Um, and I started at 1 o'clock. It was like an hour before the show. I'll have plenty of time. I'll get everything worked out. And then, of course, it was like 2 minutes to the show. I still had everything. It wasn't quite working right yet. And Cookie kept coming around, sniffing around, getting in the way. I got so aggravated. I like screamed at him. The poor dog like walked away, growled, like kind of growled at me and was like, why,
I
what?
think more like groaned.
Yeah, it was kind of like a little groan. Like, why are you talking to me like that? And he like laid down over there, like, and just like looked at me like a child that just got spanked for no reason. And I apologized, but he just he just was in the wrong place at the wrong time. It wasn't his fault. And so Vanessa's like, yeah, we're gonna do a show about peace right now. That's the way, right? It's like we say it all the time that we do our shadow work on the air with you guys, and so it wouldn't be quite the same if we didn't have a conflict right before getting on the air.
Exactly, right? And how would you know about peace if you didn't know about conflict?
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you come back into balance? Exactly. So let's take a deep breath and sigh it out.
Ah.
Like dogs, right? Shake it out.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, welcome. Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday, sovereign lovers.
Yes, we are happy to be here with you all on this beautiful spring. Actually, it's not spring. It's kind of cold today still, but it's sunny, so it's a beautiful day. Um, and hi, Rosemary. um, yeah, so we're ready to talk about what's going on in the world today. And for anyone joining, feel free to leave a comment, say hello, let us know how you're feeling today. Let us know what you're working through. And we've said this before, this is a community space. So when we are here with you guys, we want you to feel open to share what you're going through, and perhaps we can hold space for you as well, especially on today's episode, right? We're
Yeah.
talking about war, and not any specific war. In general, I think we experience war on many levels throughout our lifetimes. And I think, especially in this day and age, it feels like we're always at war about something. So, whatever wars you're going through today, we invite you to leave a comment in the comment section
Hmm.
and let us know what you're experiencing, and we can hold space for you and carry that energy, hopefully transmute it through this episode.
Yeah. Well, let's take a minute. Cynthia is saying that she just lost a friend of hers. I just lost one of my favorite people, Nick said, a true film pioneer and a genius. Well, Cynthia, I'm very sorry to hear that. I don't know Nick, but my condolences to you. And the one thing that um, gave me comfort when I lost my mom, or I mean, it took me many years to come to this place, but one of the things that I now believe is that when we lose someone, when we miss them, that feeling that we have of missing them is their presence around us, right? That we're made up of energy, and so once we leave the denser energies of our bodies, we become more ethereal energy. And I believe that when you miss somebody that you love, uh, I think the act of loving them keeps them near you,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that's where a lot of these traditions, these old traditions like Day of the Dead, where you remember the people that have passed on. And in the movie Coco, they kind of dramatize it where if people stop leaving their pictures on the altar, then they fade, right? Like
and
their
and
ethereal bodies
yeah,
no
they're
longer exist.
exactly. And I think the idea of that is to say that if nobody's remembering you, then that how does that energy, right? Like we create energy. How does that energy stay present? Right? And maybe it's not that it disappears because energy is neither
Yeah.
created nor destroyed, but it's no longer present in our realm because nobody is attracting that energy, right?
All that to say, Cynthia, that if you keep Nick in your heart, if you remember him, if you speak about him fondly, all those things will keep his energy around you. And in those moments where you feel you miss him, you can take comfort in knowing that his energy is with you.
Yeah, and that love, those memories are the energy that also illuminates their path back to source, back to God, back to heaven, wherever it is that you believe, right? These souls go, and this energy goes. So we are sending you lots of love. We're sending Nick lots of love and beautiful energy to illuminate his path as well.
Oh. So I do want to talk a little bit about the current war, just because this week, as this started happening, um, I guess Russia invaded Ukraine. And, look, I've been around the conspiracy movement for a long time, the truth movement. And, we tend to doubt everything. And so I hadn't seen any news reports yet. And even if I had, I don't necessarily believe the mainstream news. How many times have they been caught putting fake footage on TV and claiming it was something else? Um, So I made a post on Facebook like, do we even know if this is actually happening? Has Russia actually invaded? What's actually going on? And a lot of people, or I shouldn't say a lot of people, a few people got very upset with me. Um, and it turned into an argument. And one person in particular has family in Ukraine, and I guess she said her cousins were trapped and scared, and their lives are in danger. And my intention with asking the question was not to be insensitive to people who were in danger. Um, my question was really looking for independent information, like, is this true? Is Russia actually invading? I didn't know that apparently Putin took responsibility and said, yeah, we're invading, and we're looking for, I forget what he said the goal of the campaign was, whether it was just to liberate Donbass or if he wants to just take over Ukraine and reabsorb it into Russia. I'm not sure. I haven't looked deeply into it. Anyway, what I started to realize was that I was getting sucked back into that energy of conflict, of war, and it doesn't have to be about a war. It can be about anything going on politically, Biden versus Trump or any of that
Any
stuff,
controversy.
any controversy really. But, right now there's a lot of like, I actually saw people defending Putin. And some people thought that I was defending Putin by questioning whether or not this was actually happening. And that was not my intention at all. I mean, I believe all governments and all presidents are tyrants and, immoral. So I certainly wasn't defending Putin. That was not my intention by asking questions. But at the same time, the US government has been known for false flags. They like to do things like paint planes to look like enemy planes and then attack their own allies and then use that as a justification to get into war. I mean, they've done this before. They had plans to do it in Cuba. The Gulf of Tonkin was not a real incident, and they used that as an excuse to get Americans to support war. So I simply was questioning, is this really happening or could this be a false flag? Is this media manipulation or the Pentagon using the media to manipulate people? But I started getting sucked into that vortex of arguing and debating every point and all of that. And I realized, and that's when I said to Vanessa, like, I realized, oh, I'm getting like sucked back into this vortex of energy. And I believe that this vortex of energy is intentionally created so that the New World Order, the Illuminati, the powers that be, whatever you want to say, the 1%, they use that energy to help carry out their plans, right? For the greater reset or for whatever it is that they're looking to accomplish through this conflict with Russia. So I just wanted to kind of put that on the record and preface this episode by saying this is kind of the feeling or the energy of where this episode is coming out of, because I really started to get sucked into the conflict of it, and I wanted to fight and argue and debate on Facebook about it.
Mhm.
So
So,
can you be the calming voice of peace? I still have my energy worked up from the technical difficulties. So
well, for me, I have a similar perspective in what Danny was saying about, do we know this is actually happening? And I was thinking about this earlier, and I was like, we don't know anything. We never know anything with 100% certainty, right? We all believe, and I think we are all 100% aware that the powers that be don't provide 100% of the information at all times. We know that. We know that there is classified information. We know that the public is given as much information as the powers that be think we can handle. I mean, this is common knowledge. It's not conspiracy. We know that classified information exists. We know that certain things are not shared with the general public, and when we look at the media, I mean, anybody who has studied media understands that the media is not always 100% correct or 100% unbiased. It doesn't exist. So with that in mind, Danny was saying something earlier about like reading what did you say? Reading a report or a study that confirms something that you believed. And I was like, even the studies I feel like aren't always 100% fact, 100% pure information. Every study has an agenda in mind, right? Whenever we're doing a study for this, there's always an agenda in mind, and we're looking at that information through a particular perspective, expecting a particular outcome. And sometimes we don't get the outcome that we expect, but that's the lens through which we're researching that information. So to me, there's never, you know, how do we know what is fact other than what we experience ourselves, right? Other than what we know, see, feel, touch, and get to live ourselves. That's the only thing we know for sure. And even then, sometimes I think that's questionable,
I was
right?
just going to say that
Because,
even then we experience things sometimes that are not actually
yes,
happening the way we believe they're happening.
we experience things through our own filters, through our own lenses, through our own traumas, through our own insecurities and beliefs. So, there's that, right? So with all of that in mind, it seems completely silly to me for us to argue with each other over opposing viewpoints when we know for a fact that our viewpoints are not 100% fact unless you are actually in that place. And again, right, if you're in a place where you're being bombed, where you're being threatened, where you're living in fear, you only know who the attacker is, who the bad guy is, because you're hearing from the media, you're hearing from the government who the bad guy is, right? And so, again, do you trust 100% what the media says? Do you trust 100% what the government says? Again, we don't know, right? So, from my perspective, when we pray for peace, right? We pray for Ukraine, we pray for anybody that we believe is suffering. Yes, that's beautiful. I love the idea of praying for somebody, of praying for the safety, for the healing, for the peace, for peace, right? Praying for peace. But when we are interacting with somebody else, with our neighbor, with somebody on the internet, that is your prayer. How you interact with your neighbor, how you interact with somebody who has a different perspective is your prayer to the world, is your prayer for humanity. So when you're engaging with somebody and you're disrespectful because you have a different point of view, a different perspective, a different opinion, then you're not exactly praying for peace, right? How can you pray for peace when you're at war yourself? When you are indulging the war by being disrespectful, by not having compassion, by not having empathy with somebody who has a different perspective. That's my opinion. And that's my stance on all of this.
Amen. All right, so is that it? Show over?
No, I mean, I think when we come back to that, when we remember that, right? Because I can pray for somebody that's across the world. Of course, I can pray, and it's very easy to pray for somebody that you don't know, somebody who you believe stands for what you believe in. It's very easy to do that. But when you're in front of somebody who has a different point of view, how you engage with that person is is a lot more important, has a lot more effect than anything than your prayers to somebody else. Thank you. I just saw that. Thank you, Cynthia.
Yeah, I think this goes back to embodiment, right?
Mhm.
We can we can change our profile picture on Facebook to support Ukraine. We can say all these things. One of the frustrating things for me is the US is bombing countries every day. While Russia is bombing Ukraine, the US is bombing Somalia. And yesterday, Saudi Arabia is bombing Yemen. There are bombs dropping all over the world. And it's like, are you compassionate every day? Or is it just when it's on the news? Like for the next week, it'll be heavy on the news, and then it'll probably fade from US news for a while unless we get involved or whatever it is. And it's like, are you really compassionately engaged in life? Are you embodying compassion, or is it virtue signaling? Is it when the media tells you, oh, there's bombing now, we got to change our profile pictures to I support, from stay home, save lives to I support Ukraine, I stand with Ukraine, right? Um, to me, it's about embodiment. So we can virtue signal, we can post on Facebook, and that's not to say that everyone posting on Facebook or everyone changing their profile picture doesn't truly care or is not really being compassionate. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it has to go deeper than that, right? We have to embody that compassion. So if you are praying for Ukraine but nasty to your next door neighbor, how much power do those prayers are they going to carry? How much change is there going to be, right? We have to be the change we want to see in the world. And that's kind of what I was struggling through the last couple of days, getting caught up in the vortex. It was a lot of in some ways it was virtue signaling, right? I'm arguing and trying to get my point across, trying to be right in some circumstances. I have my kind of feel and theories or generic feeling without being heavily researched about Ukraine and what's been going on there for the last 8 years or so. I kind of have this generic feeling about it, and because of that feeling, I'm going to argue what I think. And obviously I can back it up with some facts, that are well established by now. But I kind of lost my train of thought.
But you
Im-
were getting stuck back into the
Right.
vortex of arguing with somebody as
Right.
opposed
So
to
that's not embodied compassion, right? Here I am trying to say, no, 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 look, I don't think that's the way it is. I think this is the way it is. And the idea is, right, if we have the truth, we know how to respond best to the conflict. And that would be from a place of compassion, right? We want to respond to the conflict. We want to support all the innocent victims. I don't support the Russian or the Ukrainian or the US government, but I do support the people that are caught in the middle on all sides you know um so yeah, to really to embody that compassion. I'm sorry folks, I'm all over the place.
No, I think that's exactly it though, right? We get so caught up in the energy of the argument, in the energy of being right, in the energy of trying to get somebody to see our point of view that we forget the compassion part, right? We
Mhm.
forget that we are dealing with another human being and we're praying for a human being across the world, but we can't have compassion for the human
Yes,
being standing in front of us. And
yes,
that's
or the
where
person we're having the conversation
yeah,
with.
and that's where the imbalance is, right? If we think about the law of attraction, right? In the law of attraction, it says you can't attract something that's not a vibrational match for you. So if you're trying to attract peace, but you're at war with somebody who disagrees with you, you're not attracting peace at all. You're not vibrating on the frequency of peace. You're still vibrating on the frequency of war.
Yes, yes.
So it comes back to how do we practice peace in times of war? How do we not get sucked into that vortex so that we can have compassion for everybody, for anybody that's in front of us, especially for those we disagree with, because I think that's where the true test of compassion is. You can be, I've said this before, you can be Jesus with somebody who agrees with you on every single point, on somebody who supports you, on somebody who loves everything that you say. But the moment you find somebody that disagrees with you, it's very difficult to be Jesus. And that's where the true work of Jesus is. That's the true work of compassion, of empathy. That's true empathy, right? Sometimes we were having this conversation last week, when you were sharing your story last week on the Thank You Plant Medicine story on Instagram, and you were talking about having empathy for your friends, and there was still this wall, right? There was still, I have empathy for you, but you have to see my point of view. And that's not true empathy. That's empathy with conditions. That's love with conditions. That's compassion with conditions. And we're, if we truly want to achieve peace on the planet, Mother Teresa said, if you want peace in the world, go home and love your family, right? Go home and be at peace with yourself. That's the real change that you can create in the world, I think.
Amen. Yeah. And we took the title for the episode today from the Pema Chodron book, Practicing Peace in a Time of War. And I read it many years ago, but I have since struggled to implement it. And I think we all do, right? It's a lifelong process of trying to heal all the parts of yourself. Any part of me that wants to argue on Facebook or wants to be in conflict with anybody around me. Sometimes I walk down the street, and we talked about this during our talk in Texas, and I see people wearing masks outside or have masks on their kids outside, and I'm like thinking, what is wrong with you? Why? Why are you such an idiot? And that's a shadow part of me. It's a part of me that is unhealed, that feels insecure, that I think to some degree, I look at those people and think these are the kind of people that want to force me to be vaccinated to go into a restaurant or things like that. Like, and I think I kind of project all that onto them just because they're wearing a mask. And obviously, that's not, it's not fair, and it may not be true. Um, for some people, for some of them, it might be true. But either way, if I'm in my sovereignty, if I'm secure in knowing that no one's going to force me to get vaccinated. If I never can go to a restaurant again, it's not going to happen. Um, and I can just be secure in that. And look, I might have to make some sacrifices, but if not, then if I can stay in a vibration of peace, it's not going to matter. It's not going to matter. It's a small price to pay for me to have bodily sovereignty, to not be able to go eat in the neighborhood restaurant and pay inflated Brooklyn prices.
Two birds, one stone.
Yeah.
So how do we practice peace in times of war?
Just like that. Breathe.
Breathe.
That's what I try to do. I try to remember when I get into these conflicts, when I'm walking down the street, I see the person with the mask. It doesn't affect me. It's not my mouth. So if they want to wear that mask, if they want to believe that Putin is a hero or that Putin is the devil and Biden's a hero, what does that have to do with me? How does that affect my life? It doesn't.
Everybody's just out there living their own experience through their own perspective, through their own filters, and who are we to decide what somebody's experience should look like, right? That's a very egotistic way of saying I know the right way to experience life, and if you don't experience it my way, then you're not doing it right.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think for me, because it's difficult for me to sometimes to get out of that space, right? Um, I grew up very insecure, and I still have a lot of that insecurity in me. I was told by a lot of people. I think I discussed this last week too. I was told by a lot of people growing up that I wasn't worthy, and so I think my ego sometimes is still on very high alert, and it still needs validation. It needs to prove itself right at times. And as much work as I have done over the last several years, the person that was arguing with me, she kept telling me, "Oh, you're supposed to be enlightened now. You're supposed to be enlightened now." And I get that she was upset because of her family being in danger. And so I understand that, that was kind of a low blow. Oh, you're supposed to be enlightened now. But I get it. Like, I understand where it was coming from. I'm not angry at it. But I think those type of things make my ego go, "Oh, are we enlightened now? What? Or maybe we're not enlightened. Maybe she's right. Attack her back." you know. And I tried very hard not. I didn't attack her back, but I did get a little snarky at times. Um, and then I ended up just blocking her because I didn't want to deal with it anymore.
And this again goes to show everybody is on high alert. And I think that you were making a really good point in the beginning where you were saying that there's always some controversy, some polarity, and what ends up happening is we get very distracted by fighting each other. We're fighting each other over who's right, over who has the correct information. Where do you get your information? My source is better. My source is more trustworthy. Yours is a lie. Blah 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 blah. And the truth is, it's all a show, right? All of these news shows are shows, right? And they all try to get uh, as many viewers as possible in whatever way possible. I mean, I studied television and radio broadcasting, so I know that a lot of it, yes, it's the truth, but it's going to be framed in a particular way to get as many viewers as possible.
Sometimes it's the truth, or it's the truth with a twist.
Yeah, exactly. It's a truth
Some of the
through
truth.
a particular filter, and so you're gonna get parts of the truth, just enough of the truth for it to still be the truth, without it being 100% accurate, right? And again, what is 100% accurate? What is 100% the truth? Everybody's always going to have a different perspective. History, is written through the perspective of the person that won, right? Or the person who decides to write the history books. So again, we are only getting information through particular perspectives, and when we start recognizing that, then we can stop fighting over a truth that somebody else told us, right? Unless I've experienced it myself, I have no way to say this is 100% the truth. And I'm not going to argue with somebody about what I believe is 100% the truth if I haven't experienced it. I can only speak about what I know and what I have experienced and what I know through my own experiences, my own consciousness, um, and in the only thing that I know 100% with certainty is that every person I encounter is a mirror of myself. And if I remember that, then it brings me back into compassion, right? This is another version of myself out there in the world having a different experience with different traumas, with different fears, with different anxieties. And if I can remember that, then I can have compassion for them. And it's very difficult. It's a practice, right? Like I said, it's our test of compassion. I can call myself a compassionate person all day long, but if somebody comes up with a different perspective than me, can I truly be compassionate, or am I only compassionate when it's easy? And then that's not true compassion, is it?
Mm-hmm.
So for us, we've created practices within our lives that help us come back to that remembering of who we are, who the people out in the world are for us. And we shared this in when we were in Texas in our talk, maintaining the vibration, the frequency of
Sovereignty.
Sorry, it's been a long time. And we talked about how we start our day with a cacao ceremony every single day. And we've suggested this to so many people. We think it's a great way to set the stage for your day, to set the tone for your day, right? Whether you do it by yourself, whether you do it with your partner, you do it with your family. When Xander's with us, he has cacao with us in the mornings. We recently had he had a sleepover with his little cousin, and we had cacao with both of them, and we had a little conversation in the morning. And it's really nice to sit down at the table, drink your cacao, and then just talk, right? Kind of remember, what was your night like? What did you have any dreams? How are you feeling? What are you feeling? And when we do those check-ins in the morning, it creates um, a different frequency for how we embark on the day. We start our day in ceremony, and we remember that every day is a ceremony, that every act is a ceremony, every conversation, every interaction is a ceremony. And yes, sometimes it's difficult to remember that, especially when we're being triggered, especially when we're being challenged. Then we forget that it's a ceremony, right? When the technology is not working, we forget that this is a ceremony.
The show is a ceremony. Yeah.
The show is a ceremony, right? Our interaction with somebody on Facebook is a ceremony. It's we're interacting with another human being, and if I am to believe that I am divine because I am a manifestation of source, then the person I'm interacting with on Facebook is also a divine manifestation of source. And if that's the case, two divine manifestations of source are interacting. That is a ceremony. And so how can I show up in a ceremony with an attitude, without compassion, with snarky remarks, right? How can I show up to that ceremony with an attitude that is not sacred? Boom.
Damn. I'm so glad I have you to balance me. To like bring me back into balance when I get crazy.
Hi, Tony. Thank you for joining us.
Cynthia, I'm going to have to reach out and we're going to have a discussion about you saying that I saved your life. I don't know how that happened, but I'd love to hear that story. I bet my ego will like that story too. Oh,
So what else? What are other ways in which we can practice peace?
yeah. What are other ways, my shaman?
We also have a nightly gratitude practice, and this has been really interesting for us. This nightly gratitude practice. I think at first, and we've recommended this to a couple of people, and I think at first people think like, how could that really help, right? Like, all right, I'm going to say I'm grateful for a couple of things. Like, what is that going to change? What, like, yeah, I'm grateful for things. So what? Um, and we can know that we're grateful for things, but when we don't actively speak it, when we don't actively bring it up and consciously think of it, we're not fully in the vibration of that gratitude. So we have this nightly gratitude practice with our now 11-year-old. He turns 11 today.
That's right. Happy birthday, Xander.
And it's always interesting to hear the things that he's grateful for. And as this practice has evolved, we've been doing this for a few months now. It's interesting because we start to recognize the things that we're grateful for, and then we start to recognize and be in gratitude even when we're not in our nightly gratitude practice, right? Because if you say, okay, tonight we're going to have right before bed a conversation and we're going to talk about 3 things that we're each grateful for, and we do that and it's beautiful and it's fun, but then during the day we start recognizing things. Oh, I'm really grateful for this, and we say it. Now we are more vocal about it. I'm grateful for this. I'm so happy that this is in my life, and we express gratitude towards each other a lot. I think a lot more than, maybe in my opinion, a lot more than most people. Very we're very vocal about a lot of things, honestly. So having a gratitude practice kind of brings you back into where we are, right? We can sit here and think the world is horrible. And yesterday we were talking about this because we saw a billboard that says there's a dark cloud over America. And I kind of laughed at the idea because yes, if we look at all the bad things out in the world, it's horrible, right? If we sit and watch the news all day long, the world is horrible. Everything is a disaster. The world is ending. We're living in terrible times. But when you take the moment to practice gratitude, you realize how abundant your life is, right? If you are in this moment watching this episode or listening to this episode on Spotify, you have access to a device. You have time to listen to this. You are safe. in this exact moment you are safe, right? Otherwise you wouldn't have the time or the device to listen to this message. So that is something to be grateful for, but we don't recognize that particular moment of, yes, I am grateful. I am safe in this moment. I have my headphones on, or I'm sitting at home watching on my phone or on my iPad or whatever. I have this, right? And that is something to be grateful for. And when you start recognizing these things, you realize the world isn't doom and gloom, right? There's so much to be grateful for. We're grateful. Sometimes Xander's grateful for a few weeks ago, he said he was grateful for the way we calculate time for calendars, and how we have a set of like months and weeks and days, and how we're all on the same page about what time is. And I was like, wow, that's a really interesting thing to be grateful for. But he took the time to think of that, to say, like, yeah, that's a really cool thing that we can all agree that on such and such date at such and such time we can meet, right? On such and such date is my birthday. We can celebrate because we've agreed on what time is. So it's really interesting how we can start looking at different elements of our lives, different aspects of our lives, and recognize how much beauty there is in our experiences, as opposed to sitting here thinking there's a dark cloud over America and we're all doomed.
I mean, I don't think the point of the billboard was to say we're all doomed, but it was asking people to pray.
Yes.
And if we're talking about life being sacred and life being a ceremony, then prayer is. Thank you, Tony. I'm grateful for your beautiful presence in my life as well, Tony. Actually, I miss you. We need to get together soon. Um, so if life is a ceremony and prayer, what the billboard was really saying was, we need to embody peace.
Yeah.
To counter the dark cloud that's over America.
Okay. So what else? What are other ways?
I don't know. I'm trying to like recenter myself. I feel like I still feel that chaotic energy, right? Like I feel like you're saying these things and I'm like, oh yeah, 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 yeah. And then I just feel like blocked. I don't know. I apologize for not bringing my A game today to the stream, but
I think that's part of the vulnerability, right? We're not, we have all of these understandings. We've learned a lot of these things. Sometimes it's really difficult to embody that. I mean, up until a few days ago, I was going through a period of, I mean, I wouldn't call it depression, because it wasn't like I was like, oh, I can't do anything at all. I was feeling really exhausted and frustrated, and I was having some physical issues with my body. And so I was frustrated by that. And it's okay to take the time to take care of ourselves, right? This is not to say forget that there's a war out there and just be in gratitude and ignore what's out there. Yes, be present with the sadness, be present with the doom and gloom as well, right? Because when we allow ourselves to be present with that, then we can release it as well. If we deny it, then what we're doing is we're burying it, we're suppressing those feelings and trying to cover it up with love and light, and that's out of balance as well, right? Yes, we recognize that there is a situation out there in the world, and when we recognize that situation, we can start to feel out what are ways in which I can counter that energy, right? How can I counter the doom and gloom in the world? There was the billboard that says pray because there's a dark cloud over America. And so yes, there's a dark, if you feel there's a dark cloud over America, pray. How can you show up in the world to counter that balance, counter that energy, I mean, create that balance? And I think when we get stuck in there's this horribleness happening out in the world and there's nothing I can do about it, yes, that can become very overwhelming. If there's a darkness in the world, that means, this entire universe is balanced. nature balances itself out. So how can I create the balance to counter that energy? How can I create the energy to balance out the dark cloud over America? And again, we go back to, how can I be compassionate to the person in front of me, to the person on the screen, to the person that is walking the dog, down the block, that made a face at me, or the person that stole my parking. There are so many small ways in which we can counter that energy. And we like to think that we're insignificant. Oh, what can I possibly do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can show up. We can show up with our light. We can be that light to counter the dark cloud.
Mm-hmm. Lisette saying that she likes to pray in the shower, that it helps give her focus. And I think water helps carry the prayers as well.
Yeah.
The flow of water helps that energy travel.
And there are so many studies that have been made about water, right? We are the drop in the ocean, and water holds memory. And when you're in the shower and you're praying, that energy is going into the water. It's changing that water that then goes into the sewer system and go out into the world. So that's beautiful. I think that's um, an amazing way to create change in the world, right? And we may think of it as, there's this whole like, oh, that's so woo woo. There's literal science about how talking to water changes the energy,
Yeah,
the actual physics of water.
yeah. Masaru Emoto did those experiments that I'm sure many people have heard about by now, where he took water and some water he was speaking positive messages to, and some water he was speaking negative messages to. And then they looked at the structure. They would freeze the water and then looked at the structure of it in a microscope, and the water that had the positive messages spoken to it was very like beautiful. It had this beautiful, like very organized and like sacred
Sacred
geometry. It was
geometry,
all
yeah.
very like perfect. And the water that had negative things spoken to it, I guess, had like it was
Look
chaotic
deformed,
and
yeah.
deformed. Yeah.
Yeah, so there are so many ways in which we can create change. And we have, like I said, it's very easy to feel powerless, especially when you consume all of the fear that's out in the media. And recently I was watching somebody was doing a video on how to come back into your body, right? How to um this person, I think, was talking specifically about sensuality, right? Coming back into feeling your body, into that presence with yourself. And that's really what sensuality is, right?
Hmm.
Being like present and in
Sensing
your body,
your
right?
body.
Sensing your body. And so one of the things she said was, slowing down. How sometimes she realized she would rush to do things for no reason. And sometimes we're in that habit of just rushing. And when you're rushing, you're not paying attention to the signals that your body is giving you, right? Your body is always communicating with you. We have just kind of learned how to suppress that, ignore that communication so that we can be productive. So slowing down and paying attention to what your body is signaling is a great way for you to come back into your body, to be more present. Recognizing when you're consuming fear, and sometimes, it's part of our we've talked about the book Existential Kink before, and it's part of our kink sometimes to consume fear. It's like we enjoy the fear. It's exciting, it's thrilling. There's some adrenaline with that, right? There's this, oh my God, it's existential doom. Um, so recognizing when you're in that pattern and saying, okay, I've indulged my fear kink for a while. It's time to take a break and cleanse my palate with something else, right? Whether it's meditation, whether it's music. Not everybody is. I have a hard time sitting and meditating, keeping my body still for too long. But dance is a great form of meditation, getting that movement, getting that energy flowing, qigong, yoga, all of these ways of movement are great ways to get back into your body because you're noticing the sensations, noticing. I was in a retreat back in October, and a couple of the sessions were dance. And with the dance, it was really interesting to feel different sensations, to feel different movement. We don't always move our bodies in that way, right? We have very, like, we sit, we stand, we walk, all of these things, but with dance there's a little bit more of a flow, and you get more in tune with that flow of your body, of your own energy. So that's another great practice. If you're feeling the stress of all of the doom and gloom out on in the world, take a moment, put on some music and dance. Move your body, move that energy. Let that be your prayer to the world as well, right? Because when you're honoring your body, you're honoring everybody else. If everybody's a mirror of me, and I'm a mirror of everybody else. And if I honor my body, I'm honoring everybody else as well.
And the scientific aspect of that actually is also when you're moving around, you're loosening up like things, you're increasing the blood flow, which then moves your endocrine system. It moves blood through your system, and then it carries the hormones and um, what are the other chemicals?
The
The
endorphins.
endorphins. The word was escaping me. It moves them through your body. It helps everything communicate, right? Your body, your nervous system, all your different systems communicate through chemicals, through endorphins and hormones and all those types of things, electrical impulses. So moving helps everything communicate and get your body back into balance, even just on a even just on a physiological way. Right now, my sensation, I feel all that stress from setting up the technology, getting aggravated, screaming at Cookie, it's all in my like the middle to upper back
Hmm.
right now. Like that's why you see me stretching and moving around, because I feel very uncomfortable because I've got all this. Let's
Shake
shake
it
it out.
out. And yes, Tony says compassion is great medicine. It absolutely is. And not just compassion for others, compassion for yourself, right? You got impatient, yelled at Cookie. You can carry the stress and the weight and the shame of that, right? The guilt of that. In interaction with someone where you couldn't keep your empathy, and you can carry the guilt of that, or you can have compassion with yourself as well. I'm still practicing. I'm still learning. I'm unlearning my ways of trying to convince people to see my point of view. I'm unlearning these defense mechanisms, and I can have compassion for myself
Hmm.
when I make mistakes, when I slip back into old patterns. And when we have compassion for ourselves, we also it becomes easier to have compassion for others.
Hmm. Yeah. I don't know if you can hear Cookie moaning.
He just groaned again.
Yeah. Kind of on a similar note, or I mean, in line with what you were just saying, but um, I was in the dog park with Cookie yesterday, and there's this woman in the dog park that gets on my nerves. And I realized while I was standing there listening to this woman talk and being triggered and irritated by it, I was thinking, I was like, why does this bother me? And I realized that she was operating in this, where she was like in this energy of like needing to be seen, right? She wanted attention, and it was very clear she was desperately looking for attention. The things she was saying, and how she was talking. So I've been in that place. A lot of you know me from that place, right? In the days of We Are Change and activism and wanting to be seen, and a lot of times we justify it, right? Like, oh, if I get likes and views, it's spreading the message of truth. But the truth is, it was stroking our ego. I mean, yeah, I'm sure some truth got disseminated and it helped wake people up, but come on. At least for me, my ego loved the attention, loved going viral when I would get arrested and that video would go viral. My ego loved that. It was worth it to sit in a jail cell for a couple of hours or whatever. Um, so I know that energy of needing attention. And so I could just stay on a surface level and be like, oh, I don't like that woman. She bothers me. She's irritating. She just wants attention. And I could, just leave it there. Or I could dig deeper and say, what is this? Why is this happening? I go through that whole process that I just shared. And then I can be like, oh, okay. I understand, Daniel, 10-year-old Daniel, you were told by your teacher that you were dumb and you had nothing to offer the class. And so she moved you back to the back of the classroom by yourself. I'm sorry that you were treated that way. It's not true. You're beautiful. You're special. You are a divine being. And I can speak to myself like that, have compassion for myself. And now, next time I run into that woman and she needs attention, I can feel compassion and be like, oh my God, she probably had a teacher or a parent or somebody told her she wasn't worthy. And so she's doing all these things and saying all these things because she just wants to feel connection. She wants to be loved. So I can then have compassion for her, but it has to start with me. If I can't be compassionate to the former me or the past version of me that was doing the same thing, looking for attention, then how can I have compassion for anybody else? So that was like a real way this week yesterday that I
Yeah.
experienced exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely, it's hard to have compassion for other people when we don't have compassion for ourselves. And there was one thing that we've talked about in the past with you having a hard time having compassion for others is saying, well, I had to fix it. I had to fix it in myself, so they should have to fix it too, right? Tony didn't enjoy getting arrested.
You're more secure than I was, Tony. What can I tell you?
um so right, and that's what it is when we don't have compassion, when we think that we've changed because we had to change because we weren't good enough before that change.
Hmm.
I was a piece of shit back then, so I had to change and become better. Now that person needs to change because they're acting like a piece of shit. They need to change too and be better. I did it, why can't they do it, right?
Oh, I have that thought a lot.
Exactly.
That literal thought of if I did the work and changed, so can they. So they need to. I have that feeling sometimes.
Yeah, and so
Just being transparent.
but that's the work, is remembering that you were worthy even before you changed. You were worthy of
Yes.
love before that change. You were worthy of compassion before that change. And you did receive love and compassion before a lot of your change.
Hmm.
You were held accountable, yes, but you were still receiving love and compassion because you were worthy of love and compassion back then in
Hmm.
all of your forms. And I think we live in a society that tells us we have to meet certain requirements in order for us to be worthy of love and compassion.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's why we think if I get this person to see my point of view, if they see the truth, then they will be worthy of my love and compassion. Otherwise, I have to keep them at an arm's distance.
Otherwise, we have to cancel them,
Yeah.
right? And there's and then on a collective scale, right? That's where cancel culture comes from. There's no forgiveness. There's no compassion. It's just, oh, they said something, they tweeted something terrible 10 years ago. Done. Cancel them. There's no,
Yeah,
and some people aren't repentant and maybe not that they deserve to be canceled from life, but maybe you want to choose to not associate with them anymore, and
set
that's fine.
boundaries. Yeah.
Right.
And I
But
think that's the thing, right? We have a hard time finding a balance because we don't know how to set proper boundaries. So our answer is cancel.
done. Get it out of my sight.
Yeah, because then we're not held accountable for what we allowed,
Hmm.
right? We consume certain media by certain people, and the moment that we don't agree with something they said, then instead of being held accountable for my choices, I want to cancel that person because I associated with them and now I don't agree with the beliefs that they had.
Hmm.
So cancel instead of setting proper boundaries. Yes, Lisette, exactly. I was just thinking that when we were talking about these tweets from like many years ago, right? Lizette wrote, some of the foolishness I wrote 13 years ago would embarrass me now. And yes, if we were all held to or judged by our worst action, I mean, we would all be canceled at this point.
Yeah, and I think that's the point. That's the point. It really, cancel culture comes from that self-righteousness. It's I have the right way. I think the right way. And if you don't think like me, then you don't deserve to be heard.
Yeah, and you don't deserve love or compassion either. And that's where the true war begins. And we talk, and it's, I think, a lot of the reason why we focus so much on the external wars is because it distracts us from the internal war.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's easier to say I stand with a victim out there instead of standing with the victim within, first of all, or the victim around you, the victim of your own actions, right? I would rather focus out there and then tell you what a piece of shit you are because you don't see my point of view. But we don't realize that it's one and the same. That external war is a representation, it is a projection of the internal wars. And if as a collective we don't do the work to heal the internal wars, then we're going to continue experiencing these external wars over and over again.
Amen.
Amen. So what else we got? I think we're running out of time.
We are running out of time, and I am exhausted, man.
Well, as we've said before, right, and as Annie said in the beginning, we do these episodes, and a lot of times we are dealing with our own internal shadow work at the time. And there have been many episodes where we've started the episode right after a fight,
Mm-hmm.
right after a conflict, an issue, something coming up that triggered us. So this was no different.
Yep. But before we go, I want to talk about our sponsor. We have a cool sponsor now, and I'm going to play the commercial because it's a pretty cool commercial. So enjoy.
Do you want free weed? Well, of course you do. John Bush here to tell you how to get it. My health supplement company, Brave Botanicals, is giving away a free 5-pack of delicious Delta 8 THC gummies. What's Delta 8 THC, you might ask? It's just like regular THC, except it's derived from the hemp plant. And the high you get from Delta 8 is much more mellow and calm without the anxiety or paranoia many people experience with regular THC. The best part is, thanks to a clever loophole, Delta 8 THC is completely legal at the federal level and is legal in most states, including many where cannabis is still banned. If you want to relax, get better sleep, and even relieve chronic pain, go to freed8gummies.com to get a free 5-pack of tasty Delta 8 gummies shipped to you today. That's free D, the number 8, gummies.com.
All right, get your free Delta 8 gummies. I really like the blueberry ones. So if you can, I don't know if the free ones, if you can choose which which flavor you like, but the blueberry ones are delicious. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I also want to just plug our social media. If you are, we're on all the major platforms, but I like to talk specifically about minds.com, float.app, and odyssey.com. Minds and Float are kind of like Facebook alternatives. They are censorship free. They do not sell your data. And I mean, to me, right now, censorship free is like one of the most important things. Nobody's getting deplatformed from minds.com and float.app. Odyssey.com is a YouTube alternative. It's a video site, and it's a blockchain video site. So any video that you upload to Odyssey is on the internet forever. It's on the blockchain. It cannot be erased. It cannot be censored. It is always going to be accessible on the blockchain. So that's why we love odyssey.com. So, and pretty much everybody in the truth and liberty movements is now aside from posting on YouTube, they're also posting on Odyssey. So I'm always encouraging people to share Odyssey links to really get Odyssey like out there, more people to know about it and use it so that we can't be censored. So thank you for joining us.
Yes, we thank you all for also holding space for us while we talk through our frustrations, the things that are going on that we're experiencing, our own work, right? It's all work. It's all a challenge sometimes, and that's okay. And I think part of I want to circle back in and remind everybody that this is a circle, a community circle, and we're vulnerable with you guys, the things that we're going through, and we hope that this opens up the conversation so that maybe, sometimes it's difficult out in the world, especially with all of the trauma, all of the fear, all of the chaos out in the world. It's difficult to feel centered. And when we come on here and share these stories, it's also to remind you that everybody's going through it. Be compassionate with yourselves, be compassionate with others. I also want to remind people that you can visit sovereignlove.nyc if you want to book any tarot readings, if you want to book any Aztec birth chart readings, or schedule any consultations with us. We're available for all of that stuff as well.
Aho.
We hope you have an awesome rest of your day. Happy Sovereign Sunday. And we love you.
We love you. Take care, Sovereign lovers.
Bye.
Bye.
Whoops.